All right,
or at
so
least I can talk a lot.
yeah. So this is the largest podcast we've had at this point, with 4 people on board. So this is a milestone for us. So Rob, when you meet a founder for the first time, what's the first thing you want to understand how they got there?
I think you know, you it's not a big jump to become a founder these days, as everybody knows. You know, it's pretty easy to do, to call yourself that. I think the most important thing for me is the why. What problem are you trying to solve? You know, you look at LinkedIn and you see this guy started this company, he exited, he started another company, he exited, serial entrepreneur type. But you know, and some of them are chasing exits, which is great. But I kind of look at why, you know, and I'll look at somebody's background, and I like to see a diverse flow of, you know, career deals. I love when I see entrepreneurs that pivot at some point in their careers, because it usually indicates to me that this is a well-rounded person who has an interesting background, and they're trying to solve a problem. So, or they're pursuing a passion. But that's, yeah, I just try to look at the why behind why they started their company.
Well, I think today we got a great story with Craig Caryl. He's the founder of Insurance MAP. He's taken a unique path from building a software company to getting pushed out, ultimately buying it back, and then turning that into a data engine for insurance underwriting. We also have his partner, Casey Pontezone, with us, who brings a technology and cybersecurity lens to the conversation, especially around IoT and the growing risk service inside modern infrastructure. So, Craig, I got to start here. You built a company, you got pushed out, and then you bought it back at a discount. Can you talk about that a little bit? What actually happened?
Well, you know, I think sometimes in life, terrible things happen to you, and you think the world's coming to an end, and it actually works out to be the best. With a few decades of experience in the world, I've learned that lesson. So I think sometimes you got to roll with the punches. And in 2015, I started a company called Critical Asset. It basically was an asset management program for large commercial properties. Got a pretty good amount of momentum. Sold it to a bunch of hospitals, a bunch of cities. As they say in the VC world, the dogs were eating the dog food. Clients liked it. They were using it. And I think my particular VC backers saw blood in the water and decided that they would be a better operator of my company than I was. And, you know, they played some chess, and they were able to push me out. It's not that unusual. It certainly happened to Steve Jobs and lots of other great people. So in many ways, I was in good company. And I took that as a terrible day for a couple of days. I went home and felt sorry for myself and licked my wounds. And then very quickly, I came up with another idea, which was to start something in the insurance industry. And I eventually launched that company. I got it funded with several $1 million. That company is up and running and very successful now. And in that process, I realized that my old company, Critical Asset, while it was great at organizing the sort of mechanical, electrical, plumbing infrastructure of large commercial properties, actually the real opportunity was to use it as a risk mitigation tool from a carrier standpoint, to understand where the problems were in the facility so we could more accurately price the insurance policy, or the risk, as we say. And fortunately, my old venture backers had run the company into the ground. No shocker, VCs are often better at writing checks than they are at actually running the company. They brought in not one professional management team, but 2 professional management teams, and went from 35 customers to 5 customers. So I was actually able to buy the company back at a fire sale. They had put it up in bankruptcy. I was able to purchase it for literally 7 cents on the dollar. And I went from owning 10% of the company to 100% of the company. So what I thought was the biggest tragedy in my life in 2020 turned out to be the biggest opportunity, because now I didn't have to deal with the venture people anymore, and I owned it free and clear. And I had the benefit of several years of analysis and understanding of the market. And so I think sometimes you have to take a step back and take a deep breath as an entrepreneur, to your point, Rob.
And so where did, Casey, where did you and Craig cross paths?
So we met each other through our men's group called Metal, and it was kind of like one of those fortuitous moments where I had just joined the group, and I was in the process of doing some consulting work in cyber, and I had gotten really frustrated with CRM, so I was determined to use an agent to solve a CRM problem, and I'd been asked to demo what I was doing to the men's group, to a part of it called the AI Adopters Club. And the same person who had asked me to demo asked Craig he's like, you got to come see what this guy's demoing. Right? So we crossed paths in Metal.
And then you kind of brought that partnership forward to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, let me give you a little background so it makes a little more sense. So the old software was a passive system. So it was just like a kind of like a map, like a Google Maps of infrastructure. And, one of the reasons that I felt like it would be a good purchase to purchase it back was because now we had AI. And we could run deep analysis on every serial number, every model number. We could take a valve that had been in this facility for 10, 15, 20 years, and just by using AI, in a fraction of a second, we could do an analysis of what's its natural lifespan, what types of obligations did it have around it, did it have warranty, manufacturer's guidelines that should be adhered to from a maintenance standpoint. And so I needed somebody that really understood where AI was today, where it was going to be tomorrow, and where it probably would be in 6 months or a year, which is a lifetime. And that's what attracted me to Casey, that he brought this wealth of knowledge and experience around AI as well as cybersecurity, because I felt that one of the great vulnerabilities in these facilities was the IoT infrastructure. All these little devices that are connected to the internet that are very vulnerable. And so I felt that Casey had a very unique talent and skill set that I didn't possess. And I was looking for somebody who would dig into the trenches. And I think while anybody can call themselves a startup founder, and certainly a lot more people probably do now than previously, it's trench warfare. And you have to have somebody that's willing to get muddy, get dirty, take the hits, get beaten down, deal with their girlfriend or their wife that thinks they're insane for doing it, and just come back every day and every hour with a smile on their face. And that's a very unique skill set. And you have to be a great poker player. You have to sit there knowing that you haven't made your payroll for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks in a row, knowing that your credit cards are completely maxed out, and sit in that negotiation with that funding source and not blink, right? Because they're looking for a weakness so they can leap on you like a leopard on a injured zebra. And so that's just there's not a lot of people, in my experience, that possess that combination of skills, and Casey encompasses all of the above and more.
Thank you.
So, Craig, you hit on a couple of things that are really kind of germane to our own experience of just kind of digging the trenches and just kind of like slogging through. And it's a lot uglier than you kind of think about when you get involved in starting a company. Everything from home dynamics to finances to am I cut out for this, and self-doubt. So I guess my question is, do you ever get to the point where you feel like you're getting out of the trenches, or is that just the life of an entrepreneur?
Yeah, when I get an exit, I get a big check, That's when I feel like I'm out of the trenches. I think that you're always in the trenches. It's the nature of a startup. And to be honest with you, it's not that fun for me to run companies. Like, once they're up and running, then there's another team that comes in, right? There's plenty of guys that just want, they want a reliable schedule. They want a bunch of money in the bank. That doesn't really feed me. The challenge is what gets me out of bed. I think when things get too easy, I get distracted and I want to go do something else. So I love the build and that early kind of stage of building it. And I think I think that there certainly becomes an easier point, right? You have six figures in the bank, even if it's low six figures. You have runway, as we say. That's when people like Casey and I can breathe a little easier because we don't have a gun to our head, you know. And so that's where I start to enjoy it, because then I can be creative. When you have a gun to your head, and you know, and the vendors are calling, and everybody's upset with you, and you kind of feel like a zero because you're upset at yourself for whatever reason. That's not the most fun part. The most fun is, you know, when you have breathing room, you can start to play chess. You can try some things. Everything doesn't have to work. I think that's the fun part for me.
Yeah, it's kind of like that sweet spot between the gun to the head and creativity versus the stable organization. So like when you came back that second time, you know, what did you learn? I mean, were there things you thought, man, what was I thinking the first time around, like that you're dealing with now, or were there, you know, I mean, that's got to be different coming back into the company you built and someone else had run with it for a while. So did you learn stuff about yourself or the company?
It's an interesting question. I think you're constantly evolving as a human being. I mean, let's hope we are all evolving. I think one of the things I learned is sometimes you have to suspend disbelief, right? Sometimes things just don't make sense. Like when you design a piece of software, like it seems so obvious to you the way you designed it, but then you see 10 people who get on the piece of software and they have no idea how to do this particular function, and you have to realize that it's not them, it's you. Like, they're the norm. They're the one you're designing for. Like, it seems so obvious. Just click here. But they don't get it. And so you kind of take a step back and say, no, I have to think the way they think because I'm too close to it. Right. So I think, you know, an example of the software I designed was Critical Asset, was designed to help facility managers, building engineers, property managers. It was designed to help them organize their infrastructure. Like, you know, all that information is basically what we call tribal knowledge, right? It lives in people's heads and on paper. So my value proposition was, hey, we'll take all that and we'll create this really cool map that shows you, you know, where the electricity comes from and how it feeds into this air handling unit and where the water comes from. And that'll put like 10% of your day, you know, your labor budget back in your operational budget. See, makes sense, right? The reality is that it didn't really move the needle for people, right? Number one, facility managers didn't have a budget. Number two, they didn't have a mandate to fix this problem. And ownership really just didn't want to hear about it. There wasn't a big enough payday. The pain point wasn't big enough. So while I thought what I did was genius, and certainly a certain subset of clients loved it, but I could only sell 1 out of 100, right? That's not a viable business. But then when I stepped back and saw, hey, wait a minute, the real value is not the facility manager, it's helping the building owner negotiate better terms and conditions on their insurance rates. That was an aha moment. I studied that market for 5 years, from 2020 to 2015 to 2020, and I felt like there was something in insurance that I should do. Like my deep gut instinct was telling me the real value might be unlocked once I understood insurance, but I didn't understand insurance at a DNA level. Then I went and started an insurance carrier, and now I had sat with underwriters, I'd sat with risk managers, I understood how little data they had about the buildings that they were insuring. And that's where I could make the connection. I was like, if I could take this map of the infrastructure and then analyze that map and come up with formulas for the propensity of a claim happening and then stop that claim from happening, then the client wins because the client has less business interruption and less losses and less claims. The carrier wins because they're having to pay less claims, so their loss ratio is lower, so the delta between what they're charging and what they're paying out is bigger, which means they can offer a discount to their client, which offsets the cost of my software. And the person in the middle, which is the insurance broker, wins because I'm making their job easier. So instead of trying to sell a piece of software into a facility manager that has no budget, I'm being introduced by the insurance broker to the owner who's complaining about the high cost of insurance. The broker is providing them a solution And that solution not only helps them negotiate better rates, but it helps them run their facility better. So it's like everybody in the value proposition wins now, instead of one person at the bottom of the food chain that has no budget, that's trying to convince 5 people above them that they should spend money on this software. That's what that took me 10 years to figure out.
I gotta, this part. Sorry, John. This is the part that I love to hear about. It sounds to me, and Casey, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this. The thing I've seen for a while since coming out of the FBI was understanding a little bit more about risk, and cyber being such a punch you in the face risk that it doesn't seem still to this day in 2026 that insurance companies understand it. They don't know how to measure it. Actuaries are still looking at this from, well, what sector are you in? What's the highest risk sector? Instead of looking at, well, if I'm doing a lot of this work to secure a client, let's say, deep CIS hardening, tenant hardening, MFA, I mean, the whole gamut, layered security, wouldn't that make me much less of a risk according to any industry measurement if we actually measured it that way versus just saying, the typical insurance company, well, what sector are you in? And we're just going to give you a policy based off of that. Any thoughts?
I mean, I think you can make it even easier and just run a few exercises. Just try it, right? Like this is our approach. And so this is one of the reasons why Craig resonated with me when he first described what he was doing is a critical assets approach to cyber in particular, right, is to punch you in the face obvious, right? So we look at assets, right? Like let's take the HVAC unit or the water handling and the pump. Like most of this stuff's got IoT connectivity on it, right? So when you look at cyber insurance policies, which of these cover the OT and the IoT in the basement, right? Because it's all cyber. And now, so muddy the water even further. We look at it in the plain, stupidly simple. Do you know it has a password? First ask that. Do you know it has a password? Does anyone know what it is? Has anyone ever changed it? Right? So figure out whether or not they know the obvious. If the obvious has been dealt with and they have a policy, right? Okay, you probably solved 90% of the market at that seat, right? So go a little bit further and look at, excuse me, look at an actual practical IT policy, and there's probably 20 questions that you could ask and understand whether or not the organization is dealing with cyber risk or not, right? Do people know how to escalate? Right? Just start asking, literally ask the VPs, do you know how to escalate? Do you know who your point of contact would be right now if there was a problem? Right? So we take, I'm using that as one example of how easy it is to actually assess maturity of an organization from the bottom up, right? But once you get into the finesse levels, like what you're talking about, that's a deep storytelling, and you have to do the same thing. We believe you have to do the same thing in commercial real estate, right? There's the foundational. Okay, do you have a fire suppression system? And then there's the finesse of, do you have any idea how to use it? Has it ever been maintained? Have you cleaned out the Have you cleaned out the sprinkler heads? Or when that goes off, is there 20 years worth of sediment sitting in there as well? There's a lot of dumb obvious, right? There's a lot of highly impactful, and then there's a lot of level of finesse, right? And in cyber, in any aspect of this within insurance, there's practical data, noise, massive amounts of IoT systems that generate noise, right? And a complete, it seems a rather large lack of ability to tell the difference. It's so to put a end cap on that, or however you want to look at it, I sort of stole an approach in cyber into critical asset of using exercises, right? And I equate it to the difference between a very sophisticated IoT system and a dude with a hose, right? One of them will tell you your building's on fire, and one of them can put out the fire, and one's a dude with a hose, right? If you start looking at your systems with that level of approach and that level of practicality, and start building your way up, there is a a line where finesse comes into play. And if you're trying to insure in the finesse, then like you better be using real-time data because you're up there into high net worth and high value, right? But the rest of it, just literally to me, it seems to be the industry is blindsided to the blatant obvious, like you called it, punch in the face cyber, right? Just start there. Do you have a policy? Have you ever run that policy? Have you ever run an exercise? Have you ever actually unplugged things?
But Craig brings up a good point. You know, it doesn't matter how good your idea is. It matters how good the idea is to the people that can monetize it, right? This is all about money. And you know, you can use the FAIR process in risk evaluation and all that kind of stuff to try to monetize what risk is. Ultimately, is what I haven't seen an evolution in yet, and that's why I like where you guys are going is. Are those processes that are making companies more secure and less risky, are they being looked at as a lower risk, thereby lower policy rate by insurance companies? So if I can prove in real time that I'm providing all of these technical administrative controls that satisfy any industry framework that you want to measure against, am I going to get a lower policy than the guy next to me who has no idea how to answer the questions for the cyber insurance policy?
So I would say we're in the very nascent stages of that happening. And here's the big aha moment that I discovered in insurance is in having been in the room with the underwriters, like in watching how they underwrite. There's so much of this going on. You know what I mean? There's such a broad, they paint everybody with a broad paintbrush. And so the fundamental problem is that good operators underwrite bad operators. That's the unfairness of the system. So our system is designed to create a very clear delta between good operators and bad operators. To hold the good operators to a very high standard and force the bad operators either to come up to that standard or to pay their fair share. That's where we're going. So we're a driving force for a new way to price risk, to extend coverage, a much more cooperative relationship between the carrier and the broker and the client instead of an adversarial relationship where the client's trying to hide, from the carrier what's really going on and the carrier is hoping that there's not a big enough claim that it really, kind of puts them out of business. That's what I saw in this industry, which seems shocking to me when you think it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. But that's the reality, is that's what goes on. And so you have to bring sort of the light of the day into this whole thing. And that's why we've been spending a lot of time meeting with carriers, FM Global, Arch, Tokyo Marine, the Hartford, Travelers, Accelerant, like a dozen carriers so far who have all said, they've all used the same two words, the Holy Grail. This data that we're providing them is a data set they've never seen before. They've never had access to. And I think that's the real excitement in what we're doing, is we're upending a business that's hundreds of years old, that has done business the same old way. We could go into the last 200 years in insurance. That's another podcast altogether. But we're basically saying, with the advent of this incredible tool set known as AI and our simple ability to organize this infrastructure, whether it's IoT devices or valves or fire suppression system or whatever, we have such a rich data set. We can actually help you as a carrier price the risk better, right? 100%. Because the reality is you want more of the good operators and less of the bad operators. Because no matter how much a bad operator is paying, you're going to lose in the end, most likely, because they're going to have some massive claim that's just going to crush your bottom line, and that's a big project to take on, and that's what I believe that we've taken on.
So when you make it evident to the insurers that there's better data available out there, what is the reaction then?
The reaction is, we love this concept. and we're going to figure out a pricing structure that makes sense. Is that 2% discount? Is it 4% discount? Is it 5%? It's to be determined, right? In 3 years, we can do another podcast and you can say, hey, in data centers, what's it on average? In light manufacturing, what's it on average? In habitational, hotel versus residential, I'll be able to say, hey, here's 500 different clients that we brought in. Here's the average. Here's what the average is based on. We're about to bring our very first residential building. It's a large high-rise in New York City. From deploying our solution to renewing their insurance in June, right? That'll be our first sort of, win across the board. So I don't know. Our goal is, as an example, that particular building pays $1,050,000 a year for their property and casualty. They paid, I think, $12,000 for the first year. Half of that was for the software, and half of that was for the onboarding. So their annual is about $5,000 a year. In other words, if we could save them 0.05% on their insurance premium, they're way in the money on us. Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of a very little ask. If we could save them 1%, now they're saving, like $11,000, something substantial like that. So that's where we're going. But like anything, we're in the crawl, walk, run. You're with us while we're crawling. I believe in 5 years, this will be standard. This type, it may not all be us, we'll have lots of competition by then, but this will be the standard in the industry. Okay, let's see your risk profile. We want to see what you're doing in IoT. We want to see, how often you're working these valves. We want to know when the air filters are being changed. We want to know, when you're testing the water on a regular, we want to know all this. And here's our pricing structure for that. Oh, you don't have any of that? Okay, well, here's our other pricing structure. That's where I think we'll be in 5 years.
Well, how's the show me aspect working? So you guys are doing a lot of stuff that's protecting the infrastructure, the IoT and OT infrastructure. How do you prove that to an insurer on an ongoing basis? Is it a quarterly thing, monthly, real time? I wonder. I think that's the rub. Are you giving them full-time access to see this thing, in full operation, and they can look at it at any moment's time to do a health check?
It's an annual report based on the submission. So in insurance, what happens is about 4 months before your renewal, and I'm talking about in commercial real estate, not in auto and stuff like that, but in commercial real estate, and our ideal customer profile, or ICP, is 50,000 square feet or larger, just to put a perspective. So your regional hospital is coming up for renewal in June. That means in February, the broker has to get three things together. The statement of values, which is the address, the square footage, when the roof was repaired, the very basic information. They have to get the TIV, which is the total insured value number, and they have to get the loss runs, where have the losses been. So those three things go into a submittal. Now they have what we call the CARS report, the Critical Asset Risk Score, where we've done an analysis. We've shown their entire MEP infrastructure. We've demonstrated that out of the 1,000 assets that are in the system, 35 of them have been flagged as problematic. Of those 35, 5 of them are absolutely need to be replaced ASAP. The client has agreed to put that in their CapEx budget. So that's going to be fixed. These other, 25 or 30, not so important. We're going to put an IoT device, a humidity inspection tool on these 10. On these other 20, 25, we're going to just increase the inspection. That becomes part of an action report that the broker submits to the carrier. How that will be expedited in the future remains to be seen, right? I think it'll not be quarterly. It might be every 6 months, but it will certainly be annual. At submission, the carrier will insist, hey, I want to see the new version of that. More importantly, I, as the carrier, want to know that all of the sort of emergency, standard operating procedure processes are in place. In other words, I want to know that if the night security guard is there and he or she hears water dripping down the stairs and they call it a fire department, that they can press a button and instantly know where the shutoff valve is for the fire suppression system on that floor. because that can be the difference in mitigating a loss in 10 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. And that can be the difference in thousands of dollars of damage versus hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. So if I'm an insurance carrier and 40% of all my claims are what we call non-cat losses, not catastrophic storms, but actually leaks within the building, a $16 billion problem, that's meaningful to me. That you can shut off the water in under 10 minutes, because that's probably not even going to be a claim. You're probably not even going to hit your threshold. So once again, we don't have 100% an answer, but I think it will be an annual report, and certainly in the beginning, that will be more than anybody's ever seen before, and I think we'll go to encourage the discount.
Yeah, it's interesting, about the insurance companies looking into what the building procedures are to determine their, responsiveness and, affecting the insurance. You see the parallel with cyber insurance. They'll ask if you have an incident response plan, but that's as far as it goes. And so it could be from one page to 100. No one really looks at the quality of the plan. So, very similar to the sprinkler system. How quickly can you contain and remediate an incident that's going to affect the damages? It seems like cyber insurance is a few steps behind property insurance, and possibly it could be because of the scale. You start talking about these really large commercial assets, much larger premiums are in place than like a small business owner, so there's more impetus to kind of pick the procedures apart and analyze, are they really effective?
Casey was telling me about a big claim up in California. What was that claim in the city, that there's a cyber attack in, what city is it, Casey?
Oh, right now in Foster City.
Foster
So,
City?
yeah, I think it's day 3. They declared a state of emergency because of a ransomware has effectively shut down their systems.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we're going in the world. And any insurance carrier that's not, like petrified about what's coming is going to be on the loss side of this. And I think very quickly, look, this is the low impact warfare. It's the Zen Zoo of war, right? Mm-hmm. Starve the enemy. You guys are feds, you understand. Sometimes you gotta wait the enemy out, starve them out, shut off their water supply, shut off their food supply, weaken them. That's what I think you're gonna see more and more.
Yeah, especially as we're kind of going into these increasing number of conflicts, in these countries that don't have a huge investment of kinetic weapons. They can certainly hire an army of hackers and do the best they can to strike back, and whatever damage they can create, whether it's commercial or government, they're gonna take the swing at it.
It takes very little to create class warfare. Like, I don't know if you guys remember the riots in LA in 1992 or 1993, but I lived here, and I was shocked at how quickly the rule of law broke down. Like, you shut off the gas supply, and you make people not be able to get money out of ATMs, and throw a few other things in there, and it very quickly. It was amazing to me how quickly the rule of law just disappeared. And so think of that on a national scale. You just start creating all these problems, and it doesn't take too many of those problems to start to domino. And I think that, we need to really we as a society need to be prepared. And, I can tell you, we are woefully ill-prepared for it, just because, one of my favorite things to do is poke around buildings. When I go into an office buildings, I'm just like this sort of infrastructure nerd. Like, I want to see, are the mechanical rooms locked? Are the panels locked or open? Do they have a panel schedule? I'll, track down the lead engineer and just start, talking to them. Nobody talks to the lead engineer. All of a sudden, I'm like, want to talk to the engineer about geeky, fire suppression information. They'll tell you whatever you want to know. And you start to really see how vulnerable these places are, if for no other reason than all that information lives in one guy's head.
Yeah, shutting down an electrical grid for like a couple days, you would see a huge domino effect. And I think, we're so used to the modern conveniences of having everything at our fingertips. Whether it's a ransomware attack or electric grid down, you're right, the domino effects would, it would break down society pretty quickly.
Part of this is why I'm interested in, the fact that you guys are doing OT and IoT. I mean, this is what the federal government is sweating bullets about right now, is they know that we're vulnerable because we have a weak, old, antiquated legacy system that's basically responsible for our critical infrastructure. And they know that our adversaries have already been targeting it for the last dozen plus years. And truthfully, I mean, I've been to, I don't know how many stupid trainings I had to go to, the National Infrastructure Management and Incident Response. We did some high-level studies about how quickly the infrastructure would break down, civil society would break down, and it was alarming of how frail our infrastructure actually is. I mean, if you take electricity out of a big city for 7 days, you're going to have mass issues, right? If you cut off water, can imagine, somebody can't go to fill up gas. I mean, you see this after hurricanes, right? At a very micro level, but go to one of the bigger cities, go to New York City, Chicago, Detroit, Miami, and cut the infrastructure off or make it so that it's limited. Imagine what would happen after a week of not having electricity or water. What would take place? People can't get gas and are then unavailable to get food. So OT is one of those things that is such a critical thing for us to focus on, not from a technical perspective, but from a risk perspective. And I know this is a fact. We haven't done the right thing. We haven't spent the money. We're spending money, national taxpayer money to go into Mars, but we can't fix bridges, roads, and electrical grids, and it's madness. And I'm glad you guys are still in the fight on this thing and working it at the micro level, at the building level. But I can tell you at the macro level, it's sorely needed as well. And so I'm glad you're there.
I think there's some really interesting things that are going on from a cyber operations standpoint. And Casey just did a great talk to another group that I'm part of about the vulnerability of the silliest things like your smart TV, and your refrigeration, your smart refrigerator, and even your Christmas lights. I mean, it was like, the hair was standing up on some of these people's backs because they realized, these innocuous things in their life that are certainly adding convenience and value to them can be turned against them, and how much they're sort of have their head in the sand about these things. I mean, Casey, give them a couple of examples from the Christmas lights or whatever.
We don't even have to look at historic examples. Besides Foster City being closed, literally, their emergency services being impacted. The CISA just banned the import of all consumer routers. Like all foreign-made consumer routers, import has been banned. That's really broad strokes. Think of the implications of every home internet router, right? This was yesterday's orders. So it's not a diminishing activity; it's an escalating activity. And the point of OT and IoT, right, we look at, again, I stole all of this from cyber. We look at exercises. So instead of looking at emergency response procedures by themselves, we look at proof of having used them. And so the approach, again, is we're going to tell you the rules, and then we're going to tell you how to game the system, right? Because in our world, gaming the system is actually reducing risk. And so we tell you, it's like, okay, so you get a point for having an emergency response procedure, but you get 2 points for running a tabletop exercise at 2 a.m. of like, pick a room number and how do you turn off the water to it, right? If you do that and demonstrate that your entire staff has been covered over the course of a 6-month period, everyone gets to do a little tabletop exercise. Like, that means your staff actually knows how to turn off the water, knows where the key is to the valve room, knows which valve to turn, right? Like, that's impactful. That's the type of zero cost investment in resilience that can actually stop damages, right? That can stop a claim. And these are the types of things that we're looking at. It's because our technology, and in particular, it's our patent, right? So our very first form of IP and our broad strokes patent that we filed is about the observation of pattern of life data and its implications on risk management, in particular around maintenance and maintenance obligations, right? Because everything is going to end of life. And so you're either standing it up or managing it to end of life. And so we're looking at, here are the obligations set by the authorities. The authorities are the manufacturer, because here's the warranty. The authorities are the IEEE or the IBEW, or it could be New York Health and Safety, or it could be the Fire Commission, or it could be whoever. There's an ongoing list of authorities that set implications for inspections and audits, right? That all by itself are checkboxes, right? So we look at what your operations are and the pattern of life that spills off those operations, all that digital data that's created, right? It could be the stills from a camera of you inspecting, or it could be your inspection report, or it could be you paying for an engineer to come on site and do an inspection, right? We dump all of that together, help you identify any of the blind spots, and then literally tell you how to game the system. Because there are practices like an inspection of a door being unobstructed. Okay, your security camera can do that, right? But oiling the motor on the door actually it lengthens the lifespan of that motor, which mitigates a warranty claim. So you can't just use the camera. And so there's very practical, sort of what we consider a bit nonsensical, and when you look at them by themselves. But you can't do all of them because of cost. You can't do all of them because of common implications. You can't do all of them because of compliance, right? And so compliance checkboxes don't prove you're secure or resilient. Running some of these exercises start to prove that at least you know what to do when something happens, right? And knowing what to do when something happens is what mitigates costs and mitigates claims.
Yeah, it's kind of taken like, this is more than just does it exist, does it actually work and function the way you
prove it.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prove it, right? Yeah, just say, you gotta say it, prove it. And how do you do that? I think that's a good point.
So
it has to get
what's,
so bad. So I just want to make one point. It has to get
Sure.
so bad to affect change, right? You have to start shutting down cities. It just has to get so unreasonable, because that's just how we are as human beings. You know, we have to stick our finger in the electrical socket enough times and get burned that we're finally like, you know what? If I stick my finger in there, I'm going to get burned.
I wish it were so, Craig. I respectfully disagree. I don't think people care. Honestly, if Foster City goes up in flames right now, nobody in New York City cares, other than the people that are directly impacted. And I'm not saying that to be callous, but it's like I remember talking to some folks after 9/11, and being from the California area, they just didn't understand. They didn't understand. Like, I was in Washington, D.C. I worked across the street from the Pentagon at Pentagon City, and you could smell the Pentagon burning for a week. And the impact of that was so, even though it was a massive international thing that nobody in our age group will ever forget, the folks out in California just didn't get it. It was just, oh, that's terrible. Oh my gosh, that's awful. 2 days later, they're out riding their mountain bikes, life goes on, and the people in New York are still pulling bodies out of the rubble, right? So I will tell you, and I think it only matters if it affects your pocketbook. Ultimately, the punch in the face cyber is if it affects you individually or as an organization, or if it affects your pocketbook. The money is pretty much the only two things that really matter for most people.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That's why I would love to say, hey, if I can prove like what you guys are doing, if I'm providing evidence of better security, of lower risk, save me money, brother. And that's how money talks, right? It's not, hey, this is a great idea, let's really, dig into this thing. Is it going to save me money or make me money? Then I'm listening. If it's not, it sounds great, but it's not something that's necessarily worth my time from an investment standpoint. And I think John and I are learning that hard lesson we want to protect everybody, no matter what the cost, especially all the small business and the mom and pop shops, because they're the ones that are overlooked. But guess what? They don't have big pocketbooks to write checks. And so it becomes very hard to do that at a way for us to actually make money and to continue to grow as a company. And so it's a reality of money is still the driving force in the universe, as evil as it is, and it still is, and we just have to work with it. But I think that's a critical thing for us to understand. It's got to affect you. National policy around this kind of stuff would be great, but I think that's a dream. It's going to be more local folks, local businesses like you, proven value, and then it starts to take off.
Yeah, I mean, look, and that's why we took that approach, because we have to make it about money. And at the end of the day, it is about money. We're appealing to the carrier, and we're saying, like, look, reward these good operators, have lower loss ratios, have 100%. The claims be lower when they come in. That moves their needle. That moves the client's needle. Like, everybody wins because everybody has,
Absolutely.
More budget. There is no other way to do it. I 100% agree with you.
So, Craig, Casey, I really want to say thank you for joining us. So, if our audience wants to get more information, where would they find you?
They can come to Insure MEP, INSURE MEP.com, or email me at craig@insuremep.com. Happy to speak with anybody, and look, I really appreciate what you guys are doing, getting the word out, and I appreciate you taking your time to speak with both of us. And I also want to just acknowledge you as former law enforcement officers. I personally think there's not enough gratitude for law enforcement in the world right now, in America especially. I think there's a real lack of appreciation. But anybody that's out there trying to keep the bad guys at bay, like, I got a big place in my heart for you, and I appreciate all you've done for this country.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, and appreciate the time that you can spend with us and talk a little bit more about the changing world of risk and insurance. Thank you.
Great talking to you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.